Hello, friends. This is Mushtari Park, I think is how you say it. It's something like Mushtadi, something like that. It's in Tbilisi, the capital city of Georgia, a tiny country where three of its neighbors, Armenia is the neighbor to the south. It's Orthodox Christian, but on the south border of it, it's such a smaller country than this, I believe, is Iran, and that's of course Islamic country. But Turkey's on the western side, and Azerbaijan is on the eastern side, and Russia is the neighbor to the north, the Black Sea being on the border as well. So this is Mushtari Park, if I've said it correctly. And last time I was here on live stream video to Facebook, I was talking about Panama and some adventure in Panama where my former wife from Ukraine, whose father was Russian, he passed away when she was 12. He worked on developing sonic weapons for the Russian or USSR Navy at Sevastopol. Her mother was a Ukrainian scientist who had patents on 3 inexpensive explosives for mining. And I think she's now in the United States. She came on over. We ended up in the United States about the year 2007 in autumn. And I finished the divorce after separating. We had been separated for 3 years. And in February 2011 here. So, before that, before coming into the U.S., we'd been in Panama for 13 months. We'd been in Georgia before that for the period from autumn of 2005 until about August of 2006, when we left from Georgia because I had foreseen that war was coming. So we went to Panama and we applied for the visa there after getting, I got a pensionado visa. So I had discounts on so many things in Panama. Medical care, transportation if it was public. We had discounts at almost every restaurant, every cafe. We would present this visa card, her or I, and we get like anywhere from 20 to 50% off. If we wanted to buy flights from Panama, if we bought them in Panama, we could get 25% off of all flight tickets from the United States to Panama. And of course, she never could travel because she didn't have the visa until the very end when we finally came into the United States together. It was around September, October 2007. But I got my tickets 25% off from Panama to the United States with this pensionado visa. We got the visa through the law firm Mossack M-O-S-S-A-C-K Fonseca. So Mossack Fonseca was our international law firm, Swiss, Panamanian, and Panama. So it was Panama and Swiss based, but the law firm was also in something like 100, 150. It was an incredible amount of partner firms that law firm had around the world, especially in prestigious offshore locations, offshore countries. So it was Swiss and it was Panamanian, and that's where we applied for and got our residency visa. We had actually developed a website for a family member. It was very, very cool, very creative. We went up into the mountains here, well, a little small place. Above, actually it's more like hills. Above the Kuspa Lake, we camped out for about 2 or 3 days up there, and we created from there the layout for a website, which still it's now been revised. About a year or so ago, that person in my family redid the website a little bit, but from all that time until about a year or so ago, the website that was being used by the family was one person. There's a couple that I've made for family. Was making an incredible amount of success for what is still being done in family. And we had put together a very creative, very inventive website, and that's how Yulia had done a lot of the work on that, and so it cost about close to $5,000 to take the trip for both of us from here to get into Panama, and let's say I think it was about 1,750 at the time. Now it would probably be more like 2,500 for another law firm. The law firm that we used is now closed. They were a part of the Panama Papers investigation by the International Consortium an investigative journalist, ICIJ, and so they became part of the Panama Papers scandal's main focus. And I think a couple of their senior lawyers or partners were arrested. And that's interesting because I'm also an occult magician, and I remember when that news came up, there was a story where when we were there, we had actually applied, like I said, for the visa, the pensionado visa, with all the discounts and all the benefits. Yulia used to run around in Panama with that, and she would then smile really big and put that visa with her photo out on the counter and get this, even into the movies. Even we had seen every movie possible because we got a discount on everything, almost. And we had seen every movie possible. Like there were like 10 or 11 movies at the theater there in the center of Panama City, Panama, and we had seen everything. We had went out to eat like every night, 5-6 nights a week. We were selling things on eBay. We would say, if we worked hard, we had a self-agreement that where if we worked hard and we got our eBay stuff done or whatever we were working on with internet work, then we would reward ourselves by going down to the beach. So we'd take a bus, 3 or 4 hours down a Diablo usually. No, this is better than that. It was like one of the tourist type tour buses. We would take, I'm joking about the Diablos. The Diablos are the buses that are really loud and noisy and really wild, colorful graffiti, professionally painted, not actual graffiti, but graffiti style painting on the side of the buses that run around all over Panama City, Panama. Everybody knows there what a Diablos is. They call them Diablos, the bus. They're like an American school bus style. But the tourist buses are the style that would be at the actual bus station where we would go and take about a 3-hour maybe ride, 2.5, down into one of the beaches that we preferred, which was, I think the name involved Costa. But anyway, there were 2 beaches nearby each other. One was black sand, volcanic sand, with a higher tide, with a bigger waves, and a more steep beach. And so I remember one time when the waves came in, Yulia was so frightened because she felt she was almost going to drown or be taken under. And she grew up on visiting the Black Sea every summer. But this was quite different for her because this was the ocean, and she wasn't quite used to this type of powerful big waves. And so she was so scared that I remember, I'll never forget this one time, we're out there, it was on the black sand, and it was a more steep incline. And I think she sat there for about 3 or 4 hours, kind of just stunned, kind of frozen from that experience. She was okay, but she was psychologically taken to a near-death experience. I never had quite that experience. It was a little bit more dangerous beach. But the other beach that was nearby, it was just a short walk, was more normal. I mean, you could surf. There would be about 10 to 20 surfers out there. So it was really cool because on the certain tide, you'd have a low tide, high tide, and so on. There would be like 10 or 20 surfers out there waiting all together at the same time. And that wouldn't happen every time we were there, but at the right time of the month or the right time, you'd see like 20, maybe 10, 20 surfers in Panama on this beach. And this was the yellow sand beach. They had a white sand beach, and we were never clear whether that was just for the resort area, and they artificially put that in there, or if it was by nature, like if it was naturally there. Like I think in Costa Rica you actually have maybe white sand beaches. I'm not sure, but I don't remember us ever going to that, because even if it was, then it was the resort area. And where we were going, it was was just in a small city there in Panama that we would travel to by one of these tourist buses every once or twice a week, and we would spend the day at the beach. And again, it was kind of our self-reward for working hard on eBay or internet work that we were doing. And so also the mall they had there, the shopping mall in Panama, was very inexpensive. And I got discounts on everything there too with the Pensionado Visa. So we had Ralph Lauren Polo there. We had all the name brands there because you had the Panama Canal, which was getting shipping in from all over the world, was passing through there, especially China. China had a huge amount of ships coming through. Russia had ships coming through, I believe. And so all the world trade, a lot of the world trade was coming right through Panama. And so they had incredible amounts of products and stores and shops there at the shopping mall in Panama City, Panama. And we had discounts on all the clothing, all the products, and we'd go in and be able, we had discounts on even all the fast food places at the shopping mall or any other place for that matter. So we had, she loved it. She was excited and very happy to have that visa, but it was a hard visa to get because I think initially they didn't want to give it. They was known to be corrupt before, and they by denying that visa, they would have had us to pay more money and pay the money again. And I wrote a two paragraph statement and published to the internet, which really frightened apparently the government or the law firm. And the next day they called and said, listen, things have changed. We have your visa ready. The government has approved your visa, and you guys will be able to have this visa. And when I'll never forget this, and now I can talk much, much more openly about it because they're now they're a dead firm. They don't exist. And I remember walking in. It's a huge law firm. It was a huge office. I mean, we're talking several floors, several stories, at least 25, maybe 50 people working on the first floor. And we walk in, and they had the windows that would slide this way, and they had at least 10 or 15 people just in that office section alone. And Yulia had been so upset the days before when they said they were going to have us apply for another visa, apply again, because, again, everybody would make more money this way. And the real story in the end was that the Georgian language, so difficult, one of the most difficult languages in the world to speak, but also to translate, because you need a Georgian interpreter and translator, professionally licensed, educated to do it, because this is law, this is government. They couldn't find one. That was the real problem. In Panama, they couldn't find one. And that's why they were going to do it. Plus, they would have just made more money. Everybody would have made more money. Government fees, law firm fees, etc. So, what we had done is, and Yulia flipped out. I mean, she flipped out really bad because she was from Ukraine, so not having papers, not having a visa, really, really flipped her out bad. And to calm her down, because she had lost her passport from the Ukraine, her citizenship country, her native country. She lost it on the beach. One day we were planning to travel. I had this great research medical device that we call the F-scan, and I was going to sell it. And it was worth like $5,000, right? We were going to buy a motorcycle and some other stuff. But we went and actually shop for a motorcycle, a two-seater, and she was going to go with me on the motorcycle all the way down through Panama into Colombia, South America, and all the way down into, we wanted to stop over in Brazil, we wanted to go down to Uruguay and to the main place in Uruguay, which is considered the little Switzerland of South America. And they have a great beach there. And so we were going to go to the capital city or the beach city in Uruguay and try to get citizenship there. We could have bought a hectare of land there and maybe grown something, or maybe put some cows there, or some cattle or something, on a white sand beach. And we would have had a residency there with another law firm. Within 2 to 3 years, we would have a second passport, like Uruguay passport. That would get us into like 180 countries or something like this. Much, 10 times better, 10 times quicker, 10 times easier than a Ukrainian passport, for example. and it would be a good second passport for me. And so all we would have to do is go there, buy the land, and wait and get residency, and maybe still travel in the meantime some, but we would have the land, and it's very inexpensive. We would have got the hectare of land for $500. So I remember walking into the law firm that day. They opened the window, and they had said to Yulia, because Yulia had called them crying on the phone and screaming at them. And they're just like, well, you know, you're shit out of luck. After I had published the 2-paragraph on this situation, because they were trying to promote tourism and travel, especially from Americans at the time, or North Americans. As I said, suddenly the next day everything changed. Mr. Vanderpool, you and your wife may come and get your visa. You have your visa. We have it ready. Oh, that's wonderful. So we go into the law firm, and Yulia is just, you know, very visibly, a very emotional girl in those times. I'm sure the military probably changed that for her, because she had the best military training in the world can offer later, after we separated. And but at that time she was still very emotional, and when we went in there, she's, you know, like, ha ha ha, we got our visa, and she's like, the secretary looked at her very cruelly, in a mean way, because she had called and basically gotten their shit, okay? And I was trying to calm her down. I'm just like, hey, we'll work it out. We'll win, and we'll do it this way. We don't need to even speak about it. And actually, my writing in 2 paragraphs, I think, changed everything. But I didn't have to speak a word before that. So the woman, the secretary of Mossack Fonseca, looks at her and says, "You're lucky your husband publishes." I'll never forget that. Never. Very, very powerful international law firm, Swiss Panamanian, that deals with, now there's open proof, corrupt foreign ministers, prime ministers, presidents, all kinds of corrupt mega multinational countries that would hide their money through there, allegedly. So that's part of why they're part of the Panama Papers scandal and investigation. So that's when this news came out. I actually sent a short email over to Yulia. She's now remarried, happily remarried, and has 2 children, and I think it looks like he's a military guy and all this stuff. And but I wanted to send her the little email on this news that, hey, they're dead now. They're out of business. 2 top partners were arrested. But at some point, I had done a little experiment with occult magic, and it specifically has to do with people that have done you wrong in the past and things like that. So I wanted to, because she was hurt by that. She was so upset. I'll never forget that. She was crying. She was hysterical. She was devastated, you know, because that for us was a lot of money and a lot of time. But it was cool, though, because when we came in the beginning, it was cool. Because when we came in, we flown into Panama, and at the airport, we had 5 people, staff from the law firm. They did a really great job. I feel sorry for them in the sense that this thing really, if it had to do with the lack of a Georgian interpreter, technically, because of the interpreting and translating of the paperwork, I understand that. It's very, very difficult. And we've had issues here in Georgia. Even if they would have got a Georgian, the Georgian House of Justice, if there's one little, you know, like it's an A instead of an O, it's August instead of April, or whatever the shit they've got going on. I've dealt with them at a government level. And at a government bureaucratic level, they are Soviet as fuck. And that means they, you know, oh, this is wrong, you have to redo it. Fuck it. It may take 2 weeks, a month, your marriage may be put off, you may not get married at all. The A is an O, not an O, and you're dealing with this ancient cursive script, you know, the Georgian language, which is, you know, extremely difficult. So I understood it, but Yulia had no idea at the time why. And I really thought initially also, and it would be very easily to assume and understand that likely it's the idea that we're all going to make more money anyway because they're going to have to pay us again for another visa application and for more paperwork. Everybody makes money. And it's like, no, we're not going to play that game. You know. But they did a great job when we showed up at the airport the first time in. There were 5 people. They had the earpieces. They had the people to take our luggage from us. They took the luggage. They were calling in the limousine to be ready to pick us up. They took our documents right there at the office we met. They took us into the office. They took copies of our passport. They took our applications for the residency, all this stuff like that. They did a wonderful job, all for $1,750. So it was literally a red carpet. I'm not bullshitting. It was a red carpet arrival for us. Red carpet, top staff, people with walkie-talkies, cell phones, professional security bodyguard, and law firm staff. That's what we got for $1,750, which is a lot more money in Panama at the time. Probably still is, I don't know. Like I said, though, now I think for the same thing, it'd probably pay like $1,000 more. It's probably like, last time I checked, that was like a year or two ago. I think it was 2 years ago, because we're talking about with Kate. If I would have married with Kate, I'm not sure if Kate would have even got into Panama, because she's actually with Azerbaijan citizenship, which is even more difficult than a Georgian citizenship to travel on. Now Georgians can get into Panama, I think it's like for 6 months or something, without a visa. So if you are Georgian and you have money today, you could fly to Panama. And Yulia loved Panama. She and her mother came down when I was visiting in the United States. Her mother came on over from Ukraine and to keep her company because I was in the U.S. for like 2 months. And then I came back to Yulia in Panama at one point. And I think that they loved it. I mean, they really loved it. Fresh pineapple, like nothing you can buy in the store. The taste is absolutely beyond anything you can buy at the store. Same thing with the eggs and so on. People that live on the farm in the country or that have their own garden, they know this stuff. But in Panama, it's just right on the street. It's like, oh, we got this today. Here, have some. Pay $1 or something. And they're using American currency there. In reality, the guy from the State Department at the time, when I called to complain about the law firm, he's like, well, listen, tell you what, the United States really controls everything there still. They're using, the dollar and all this stuff. He goes, so you guys won't have any problem because that's another part of the story. It's a true part of the story. So when we came in to meet this lawyer, I don't know if I should say his name. I've said his name before. I think it's like Robert Coronado or something like that. When we came in to meet the lawyer to actually receive the visa, get this information confirmed by him face to face, it was a few days or a week later or something. So when we come in and sit down in his office, he's like, but because he's trying to explain like how this shit could have happened to us, right? And he's like, but she's from Ukraine. Your country would behave like this too. So he's making it out to be that it's because she's from Ukraine. And they didn't want to give us the pensionado visa or the visa because she's from Ukraine. Face to face, this is what he said. But your government, speaking about the United States government, this guy's Panama lawyer, but your government would have done the same. She's from Ukraine. I said, yeah, but she's my wife. That's my response to him. Tear comes down from his cheek. I had him in tears. And so I looked at him and I said, listen, I said, I understand that, but she's my wife. But I said, here's what I will do. I said, to kind of wash over this situation, I will write an ebook. And I will in pictures and a couple of comments here and there, I will talk about our great experiences here. And I will publish it. And anyway, we left the office that day, and I'll never forget that. International lawyer, powerhouse lawyer, actually in tears. But I stood up for my Ukrainian wife, and they understood that I would take not one iota of shit. Not one. Years later, I saw the news and seen some advertisements in this. I'd been working with an occult magic, especially on justice. Anyway, I found it interesting that in business, they're dead. They no longer exist. They're done. So I had sent that little paragraph over to Yulia because one day she sent me a short little paragraph just saying that we don't communicate really. We really don't. But there was some jokes I was telling about the times we were in Ukraine and some of the shit that was just too goddamn funny. And some of the Ukrainians found it really funny. They found it comical. We could understand each other. And she sent me a little paragraph just to kind of acknowledge that, hey, remember, this is too funny. And anyway, I'll never forget the first flight over to Ukraine. The business guy from Ukraine, they all get these pointy shoes. It's like something you think you're in like a fantasy movie, like children's story or like a Willy Wonka story or something, because these guys have the pointy little shoes. They're a little bit different. When they land over there, everybody claps like, oh, yay, we didn't die, we've landed, and nobody's dead. The plane is still here, and so are we. Life is good. Clap, 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 clap. This doesn't happen in the United States, but it does over here in the East, the Far East, or the further East, and when you fly into Ukraine and Eastern Europe. And I remember telling this guy a joke, and I tried to tell him another joke. And he's got this Ukrainian look like, and he says to me, he goes, listen, I want to tell you something. American humor and Ukrainian humor are quite different. And probably we're not going to find a lot of your jokes funny. We have a different sense of humor. And it's true. I mean, it was cool. He was a good guy. He wasn't being an ass or anything. He was just telling it like it is. And and it is true. It's kind of like when you were, if you guys are from America, you guys will remember Benny Hill. I think Benny Hill, like British humor. It's quite different too. We found some British musicians and comedians and all that quite funny, but most of them are kind of, we think, that's a little quite different, and it's not really that humorous for us. So this guy, Benny Hill, I'll never forget, I always thought he was a bit weird. I never found him that funny. It might be some kind of similar, and only that there's like that kind of difference in the whole deal, But at the airport, I'll never forget that. Those guys, Mossack Fonseca, were the law firm, provided us with the 5 people, red carpet, no shit, for real, limousine. After we had visited from the airport, we were taken to the law firm. We were taken by limousine across this bridge that went across the ocean. It was part of this, into the city, into Panama City. And we were going to go to Costa Inn. That's the place where we chose to stay for the days that we were staying in Panama City. This is before we found our apartment later. We were going on out to Santa Fe de Vergas, where we lived out there for like a month or two, out next to the jungle. No joke, right on the jungle, right on the edge of the jungle. I told that story last time. But I'll never forget, because after this red carpet arrival, 5 staff, the guys had professional security, bodyguards, all that shit, and remember, all for $1,750. And we're leaving the airport with these guys. We're at the law firm. We leave the law firm in the limousine, and it's at night at this time because, like I said, we had to go over our documents, answer a few questions. Then we're on our way across this beautifully lit bridge over the ocean. And it was like a scene out of a movie, out of all the dreams of as an American kid growing up and seeing all these Hollywood movies. I was like living. I've done this like dozens and dozens and dozens of times in different situations overseas, in these travels and these experiences in this expat style life. She is so excited, she's clapping, and she did this flying into Georgia, by the way. It was so exotic. We flew from Moscow over the Caucasus Mountains in Aeroflot. Now, granted, the seatbelt we tried to clasp together looked like it needed to be replaced. It was something like from a 1975 American automobile, for example. And I was nervous as hell. But Yulia was excited as can be. You could see the beautiful snow-capped, steep granite of the Caucasus Mountains, and then the green of Tbilisi and the other parts of Georgia, the pines, the cedars and all, flying in. She was so excited. And Georgians are so nice and hospitable people that there was couples asking us, you need a place to stay? Come and stay at our place. We play piano, we have great food, great wine, you can stay with us. We'll charge nothing. We're like, wow, this is a true story. Our first time into Tbilisi, into Georgia. And so that's the world-renowned hospitality that the Georgians have been known for decades, maybe centuries. And that was an offer on our first flight into Georgia. She was so excited. And of course, at the end, everything changed on our way out of here. She hated it, and she hated the Georgians. It's a different story. So it's quite a difference between living versus visiting and traveling. It's completely two different stories. Anyway, but going over that bridge in the limousine over the ocean, and it was a long bridge, the lights at night, after red carpet arrival, and red carpet, professional, fully staffed, armed bodyguard service. It took our luggage, everything, for $1,750. And got the pensionado visa about 4 or 5 months later. And as I said, there were different ideas in my mind about, and statements as to why there was a delay in that. But I fixed it myself. And as the law firm admitted themselves to her, they said, you're lucky. You're lucky. Your husband publishes. So it's interesting because later, I'm going to throw some astrology in here again. I've studied some very, very deep, very rare, very hard to find occult texts. That was my master area of expertise. There's a Renaissance form of Kabbalistic astrology that you had to draw out by hand. That's usually the best ancient astrology. And we're flying into Mexico later. We'd already come back into the United States. This is like a year later, year and a half later. We had gotten her the braces here in Tbilisi. And in Panama, maybe it was like $20 a visit. That's it. Because I got a discount on everything. She had a discount on everything. We both had the visa. The discount on everything. She loved that because she loved saving money. She had a very hard life coming up. And so it was maybe $20 a visit, maybe $10, $20 a visit. And she'd get those braces fixed up. Later, we got into the United States. They wanted like $2,000 to $4,000 to get them taken off. We're like, and so we found 2 or 3 different ways to finance this, from family to official ways to other ways. But we checked on the Tijuana, Mexico, and it would only be like maybe $300 or $400, maybe $500 max. We could fly there back, both, and pay less. Both of us flying there and coming back, because there's no way in hell she would go there alone. And when we got there, anybody who's been there knows why. And so we both went there, and on the way back, I'm working out the Kabbalistic astrology, and it puts me down for having the pen of God, the pen of fate, the pen of God. Like, it's a 7th house placement in Renaissance, more ancient, more medieval type of Kabbalistic astrology. It is to say that it could be the pen of fate, the pen of God, writing, speaking, writing. And of course that's reflected in the fixed stars astrology I have, which is the Zubin-Eshamali with Mars as a foundational star, which is being a powerful speaker or a powerful writer, especially on matters of social justice or injustice. And that Mars crossing in the fixed stars chart with Zubin-Eshamali was a very big interest, and noted audibly in a reading from Bernadette Brady out of Great Britain. She's originally from Australia, born and raised in Australia, but practicing, last time I'd known, I think in Scotland or anyway, Great Britain. And the Mars crossing she really noted as being the biggest strength and very unusual in my chart. So So this is how I dealt with the law firm. In fact, before any of this started, years ago, I had a most powerful lawyer from Lafayette County. I fired his ass right in city court, right there, right in front of everybody, very public, right in session. I said, "You're fucking fired." That ended his shit in dealing with me. Right there, right in public, right in court. I didn't take one iota of shit. And his name? Perry. Perry. Because that's just how I roll. And I'll never forget, he was a little bit taken back. Still a powerhouse lawyer. Nothing he couldn't handle, of course. But he packed his shit and left the courtroom, and we never spoke again. So that's how I deal with attorneys. That's how I deal with lawyers. And more recently over here in the last few years, when I had to deal with a former Ministry of Defense security expert, police officer, military police, Freemason, Georgia security expert. What they wanted out of me was where Russia was going to come into Georgia next. I went to Senator Blunt's office on April 15, 2016 on an emergency visit back home because my cousin had been shot 3 times in the chest by her deranged husband, who then took himself out. Immediately I was back home, within 48 hours, something like that. And thanks to community relatives of that, they funded through GoFundMe about $1,040 to her funeral expenses, which helped my mother to cover the expenses because it was not known if there would be any coverage from insurance or any of the estate at all at the time. In fact, my mother took care of everything else at that time. So I was immediately, and she's the only one that did. So I was immediately back home, dealing with all of that, dealing with the funeral home, dealing with the paperwork, dealing with the both where she was at, out of state and our state, both. And I was at Blunt's office in Columbia. Thanks to them, I got in the next day. I called them last minute. I said, "Look, they finally got the funeral. The remains are here. It's going to be tomorrow. I'm flying out of here on Monday. Can you get me in?" They got me in the next day. I said, "Here's how Russia's coming into Georgia next. They're coming in through Parliament. Here's what needs to be done. There needs to be economic sanctions. There needs to be against any Georgian leadership that supports the Russian occupation there. There needs to be blah, 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 blah." Within 6 days later, U.S. Congressman, now he's on the Armed Services Committee member, U.S. Congressman, Republican, Oklahoma, Steve Russell, former U.S. Army Airborne or Army Ranger, fought in Iraq, I believe, come out and said half of what I said in calls to the U.S. State Department and calls to the U.S. President at the time, Obama, also to the Georgian people, also to whatever Western journalists in their free speech that would be here to report on what could be the Georgians' last days of freedom. It's a true story. Blunt is a Republican. They're all in the same team. Blunt, I was informed first and up front, the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee. I was told that by Jordan at his office in Columbia. He goes, "Mr. Vanderpool, you know that U.S. Senator Blunt is on the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee. Sometimes they are hearing things or are told things or know things that keep them awake at night." And I said, the next step that Russia will take into Georgia is through the parliament. It's going to be legislatively. It'll be through legislation. It'll be through parliament. And so 6 months later, that's happened. Now, officially, the U.S. Officials have said that the election was okay and legit and all that bullshit. Everybody here knows that's a lie. The majority of Georgians know it's bullshit. They know that the elections were stolen or bought. Anyway, there's a news article on DF Watch. If you put in U.S. Congressman Steve Russell, you can read about Steve Russell and that speech on dfwatch.net. You can also type in Steve Russell, Congressman, Georgia floor, House floor speech. And you can pull it up and watch him speak. That's exactly 6 days after I visited U.S. Senator Roy Blunt's office in Columbia. I've enjoyed open access to Senator Blunt's office, even most recently having emailed and contacted and spoken by phone to the Senator's office in Kansas City this time on some issues here. Meanwhile, the American people, through U.S. aid, has spent over $1 billion in gifting the 3 million Georgians that are in country here. There's actually 3.7 million people in Georgia, population-wise. There's probably 2 million outside of Georgia that are actually Georgians in other countries that are helping to earn their way or studying or working elsewhere, and many of them sending money back to support their families here because the economy is so terrible here. There's so much corruption and alleged kickbacks on USAID programs. In a words of a former government minister here of 13 years, has said a lot of those kickbacks are going back to the U.S. Embassy under the previous government, millions of dollars, and that's why I requested that through a petition to the U.S. Whitehouse.org or whitehouse.gov website, petition website, that they be investigated. And I sent that over to Blunt's Kansas City office, a copy of that, because there's so much corruption here that, like another friend, for example, not only did the government minister, the former government minister here of 13 years, we sat and we had tea together in the living room of his house. And he says, listen, under the previous government, they had kickbacks by the millions going back to the U.S. Embassy here on these aid programs. So money that would come here and supposed to go into some program to help Georgians, to help Georgian, the nation, Georgian, the society, on projects like, for example, a close friend at the time, some years ago, said, look, I used to work on these IDP, internally displaced persons, settlement houses that were displaced from the war 10 years ago. And he said, what the guy would do, the contractor, the general, they'd give him the money on the project. He'd pocket half the money and go on vacation, do whatever the hell he wanted. And they would build the shittiest, shabby little shacks, smallest as possible. The internally displaced persons are going to go live there, and now they're all inadequate because half the money that should have been spent was pocketed. That's how it goes. So this is Americans' money. So you go back home, I go back home to Missouri. They've got these beautiful brand new buses, great air conditioning. I'm glad to have them. It's cool, it's great. But I know that there's a lot of money that's going into the pockets of the corrupt here that are oppressing the people. No better country on earth builds a better police state outside of America than the American government. Have a nice day, friends. Enjoy. And I'll tell you that in Panama, it was grand for us. We had a really wonderful time in Panama. We had seen every movie possible. We got to the point where we'd go out and we'd eat every night. We'd have everything, our favorite little outdoor cafe, Panama, live music sometimes, Spanish live music playing, little dances sometimes. We'd go to the movies. We'd seen everything. We'd go to the beach a couple times a week. We'd stay for about 4, 5, 6 hours. We'd take the bus ride back in. We'd do our eBay work. We'd work, side by side. We'd do eBay. We'd make ads. I wrote a storm warning for Israel from there, which was an astrological predictive work on the country of Israel, published March 17, 2007, which predicted the war that then came later, exactly down to the day accurate. And when a Russian general was openly saying there will be war by the end of March, I said, no. I wrote in my prediction that it would be, I think it was June or the end of June, which I was right. The general was wrong. But on that date that the general predicted there would be war, there was a Grand Cross in the chart for a day or two, and that's when I had pointed that out in my predictive work too, and that's when the Arab leadership got together and threatened Israel with war. They said, give up some land or face war. Later that summer, Lebanon and Israel had a hell of a war, and it ended in signatories exactly when I said it would and predicted it on August 1st, 2007. Interestingly enough, when I'd first met that former government minister of 13 years here, I met him on an ISAC event at the Alexander Kartveli exhibition. And I remember him looking at me and saying, yeah, he's probably an Israeli spy. It was so goddamn funny. He knew something about me. Have a nice day, friends.